was sitting at very front, because I always do. And normally when somebody speaks, nobody interrupts them. I don't do that. He started speaking and points his finger at me. He points, Muhammad, the Muslims 5 times a day pray and curse Jews and Christians. Isn't that right?
All right, so hi everybody, welcome to another episode of Book Cafe podcast. In today's episode, we will be talking about this book right here behind me entitled American Muslim Agenda. And I'm extremely delighted to have the author himself in today's episode to talk about the book. But just before that, if you are watching this on YouTube, do please take a moment to subscribe to the channel. It really helps us out. And if you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or Spotify, do please continue to download because we're going to have a lot of content added very soon. In fact, we have content added all the time. So without further ado, let me just do my due diligence for this particular episode by welcoming the author himself, Dr. Mike Ghouse. So hi, Mike. Assalamu alaikum, and welcome to Book Cafe podcast.
Walaikum salam. Thank you so much. I appreciate that, Omar.
Okay, so Mike, we will of course get to talking about the book in a minute, but for our viewers and listeners who haven't read the book yet and who may be discovering you for the very first time, do please take this moment to tell us a little bit more about yourself, your ethnic and religious background, your education background, what you do for a living, and in fact, anything at all that you'd like to share with us.
Sure. My name is Mike Ghouse. I was born and raised in Bangalore, India. I had a Sunni Muslim family. I don't identify myself as Sunni, just a Muslim. I moved to the United States in 78 or 79. I was in a home building business for many years. Let me also share, I was an atheist for most of my life. And then when I was listening to American TV radio, it was very difficult to hear them out because they were telling some truths, but there were a lot of lies along with it. So that I jumped into it. I called the television station, and one of the guys who was my tenant was the biggest radio talk show host in Dallas by name David Gold. Although I was an atheist, I was still respectful of all religion at that time. So he would tell the lies and I would call, and he would not put me on his big radio show. Mm-hmm. So one day I went to his home, renew the rental. He was leasing a home from me, and to renew the lease. And I said, David, why is it that you don't put me on the radio? I want to talk about the issues. Some items that you mentioned are true. He says, I will not put you, Mike, because if I put you on the radio, you will puncture me. You'll burst my bubble. I want people to fight, even though I know what is going on. And that way my ratings go up. My ratings go up. I get a more paycheck. My paycheck increases. Then I can pay you direct by 10%. So it was all about ratings. Then I went and bought my own radio show in Dallas, Texas. I had a 3-hour radio, and it was called BIMS, Bangladesh, Nepal, Pakistan, Sri Lanka. All the nations were covered. We talk show was 1 full hour every Saturday, and all the topics anybody can share no matter what. So that was my background. And then my passion was always pluralism. I started searching for a religion for me. I did quite a lot of research on the Quran and Islam. I cleared my mind from all that was taught to me as a Muslim, as Islam, and then just focused on Quran and studied Quran thoroughly, found out it is a very book of guiding, and it is not about creating, governing somebody, but it is about correcting your own behavior to live in peace and creating a society where everybody can live cohesively and in peace. So that's when I chose to become a Muslim in 1999. And after that, I felt an obligation that even Muslims have misunderstood Islam. But luckily, by the way, all the Muslims in different parts of the world, you will find more intellectuals in Bangladesh. And I have many friends in Bangladesh who write eloquently. There is a lot of flaws in our Sharia laws that I think some of the Bangladeshi Muslims are correcting, and we are working on that too. Then I felt that I need to write a book about the misunderstandings of the Quran of Muslims not fully getting Islam. So that's what caused me to write the book. And also, I was on Fox News for about 7 years, and Sean Hannity is the number one rated guy in the United States. Most people listen to him. He and I fought every night, but the end result, two things. He used to bash Quran every night on his show. After I sat down with him, gave a copy of this book, gave a copy of Muhammad Assad's translation of the Quran, and he gave me 2 hours. We sat down and I went through about 6 or 7 different verses that like kill the infidels wherever you find, things like that. And then he understood and he said, I understood it wrong. So he quit bashing the Quran. And the other guy, Stuart Varney, quit calling Muslim terrorists the phrase. He started calling terrorists among Muslims as terrorists in other faiths. That is what caused me to write the book for my fellow Muslims and fellow Americans to understand Islam in a different perspective. I think the Islam that I represent was the Islam Prophet Muhammad taught. Pristine, clean, pure, about humanity, about the Alameen, the universe. So that's what. In fact, Omar, I started writing, if it is not common sense, then it is not Islam. Islam is purely common sense.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah, for sure. Well, Mike, thank you so much for that. I think that's a fabulous introduction. And of course, I am extremely heartened to hear that there's been a lot of progress in your eyes with regards to Bangladeshi Muslims who are living in America. Because I remember that right after 9/11, I was actually a student. I was in Canada at the time, and the US was, of course, just south of the border. And so I just wanted to ask, in Canada at least, as a foreign student, I never felt like an outsider because it was quite a multicultural country, and Toronto itself was very multicultural. But if I could just ask you, Mike, with regards to your empirical experiences in the days right after 9/11, what was it like, to be living in, I believe you were in Texas at the time, living there at the time before moving to Washington, D.C. So what was it like for yourself as an American Muslim, as well as for Muslims in America, to experience those initial days right after 9/11? Please tell us a little bit about that.
my experience was not a difficult one. Right after 9/11, within 2 months, I was called in by the University of Colorado in Boulder, in Denver, near Boulder. I traveled. I was concerned. And my name is Mohammed Ghouse. I was concerned if they're going to stop me, do anything. I was ready to face anything that came. And I was totally surprised. I flew to Denver, came back, and nobody stopped me. Nobody looked me at suspiciously. Even sitting in the plane, different people. There was never any hassle for me. But on the other hand, several Muslims were hassled. He was killed in a gas station thinking he was a Muslim because the six were beers. Other than that, Pakistani Muslims went through the most difficult time. Many of them went back to Pakistan. On a regular basis, I was on radio shows. On the day of 9/11, Omar, 2 radio stations called me and said, Mike, we are not going to play music. Can you come and talk about what's happened today? I dashed to the radio station. For the next 8 hours, I stayed there on the radio station. I brought in every local mayor. There are about 35 mayors, small cities, every radio show, and every religious person, including atheists who's non-religious, were on my radio show. And I had civic leaders, Muslim leaders, Hindu leaders, everybody on it. My goal was 3. One was to bring composure and bring coherence to the incoherence that was taking place. And then asking people to donate funds, the firemen out there in New York who gave up their life. Third was to start interfaith religious meetings. I called the Hindu temple in Dallas. They agreed to put together interfaith meeting. I had everybody from Baha'i, Buddhist, Christian, Hindu, Jain, Jewish, Sikh, Zoroastrian, everybody was there. And everybody did their songs. Hindu leader, she sang the Om Shanti mantra, which is a very beautiful, means peace, peace. When she left, I got chewed out. I got harassed by several Muslims how to bring a Hindu into a mosque. And she was chanting Hindu things. I said, first, read what she said. Look at the meaning. If it was in Arabic, she was saying, Alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alamin. Anyway, that me and the president both were harassed for a while for doing that. But that was the first time a Hindu was chanting Sanskrit in a Muslim mosque. That idea was to remove the prejudice, bias that was there. And it went very well after that. And years later, we started a ceremony, a big interfaith ceremony. We brought every mayor, FBI chiefs, all religious people. And first time we had 562 people representing all the traditions, started called the Unity Day. And we've been doing this for 17 or 18 years now. We bring people from all traditions. Nobody is excluded, and do the Unity Day. And that has been in opening people's hearts and minds towards each other.
Mm-hmm. Understood. Well, Mike, thank you so much for sharing that, because I was extremely curious to know what it was like in America at the time. And, even though I was just right next door in Canada at the time, I was there till 2006. But I'm quite sure that the experience I had in Canada must have been somewhat different from what was happening in America. But I'm glad to hear that there was a lot of progress being made around that time. So, Mike, if I could just put it to you this way, we will definitely get to the book in just a couple of more minutes. But just one last question before we dive in. How would you rate the current climate in today in 2023, as opposed to 2001? Right after 9/11. Would you say that the impression that the average American has towards Muslims has changed drastically since those difficult times, or would you say that we've made some progress, but there's still a lot more
Yes,
progress?
it has changed.
It has changed. Okay, could you elaborate a little bit more on
True.
that? Yeah.
Yes, I believe at one time only about 33% of Americans, particularly evangelical Americans, looked favorably towards Islam and Muslims. Now that number has gone up almost double to, it's almost like 70%. Trump shook it up, but Trump is gone. So everything is back to normal now.
Okay. Okay. All right. Awesome. So yeah, that's very heartening to hear that, that there has been such a significant improvement. And I'm quite sure that, all the activism that you've been involved in and all of the people who have been supporting you in all of the great work that you're doing must have definitely had a huge part to play in all of this.
I'm only a small part in it, but almost all Muslim leadership in the
Right.
United States put in a lot of effort for that.
Absolutely.
Sorry, go ahead.
Exactly. And as they say that, little drops make an ocean. So definitely, I believe that the drop that you have contributed to the ocean, Mike, has really helped the American Muslim agenda for sure. And I think that this is a very good time, Mike, to actually deep dive a little bit into the book. And I believe that one of the biggest takeaways that I personally have gotten from the book is your emphasis on Islam being a pluralistic religion, or the fact that you see Islam as a religion that promotes pluralism, or the fact that at the heart of Islam, pluralism is essentially the bedrock of the Prophet Muhammad's message. And of course, right next to you, I can also see the symbol for the Center for Pluralism. So with this in mind, Mike, could you just help us define firstly what is meant by the word pluralism for the benefit of our viewers and listeners who may not be as familiar with this term? Please go ahead. Yeah.
Pluralism, as we have defined, respecting the otherness of other and accepting the God-given uniqueness to each one of us. Omar, each one of us is our own thumbprint, eyeprint, our DNA, our taste buds. Everything is unique, very unique about every individual. That's how God has created. Now, going back into Quran, it is God who created all from a single couple and placed them, it is the verse 49:13, placed them in different nations, tribes, and communities, and by extension, different religions. And then again in Surah Maida, verse 48, if he had wanted, he would have created the entire world as same, identical. All men 6 feet, all men brown, all men weighing 180 pounds. whatever. God chose to create us to be very unique. We're so different. Accepting it is God's choice for us to be different. If we don't respect that God's choice, we're being disrespectful to God. If a white man, an African American man, or a Jewish man, or a Hindu man, or a woman, I'm disrespectful of God because they didn't come out from nowhere. It is God who has created all of us. Accepting Him as God's creation is pluralism. Now, pluralism fits in many areas. For example, religion, how you worship God doesn't matter to me. But the essence of your worship, whether you are a Hindu, Christian, Jain, Muslim, whatever religion, you are worshiping God for one purpose, to have humility inside, whether you standing, kneeling, prostrating, why should it matter to me as long as they're worshiping it? Second, in culture, food, for example, in Bangladesh and India, we eat similar food. In Africa, they eat different food. In Middle East, they eat different food. In the United States. And what we have to look at is, oh, I don't like that food, the way they eat. For example, some Americans don't like fish. Say, I don't like that food. It's not a good food. No food is bad food. If you look at the essence of the food, it is for nutrition. That's why we take food. That's why you drink water. That is, food is one part of the culture. Second part, if a woman wears a hijab, if the Sikh wears a turban, what is my loss? Right. If somebody wears shorts, somebody wears long kurta, what is my loss? If you start questioning, your prejudice melts and you connect with other fellow beings. Then also the essence of why what we do. For example, some people have difficulty, especially Indians and some Americans, the way they wear their clothes and they wear their headgear. Why have the prejudice? If you look at the essence, why they wear what they wear is very simple. I was in Saudi for 3 years. There is a windstorm that blows 35 miles an hour. Sand dunes, grains of sand hits your face. It bloodies the face, bloodies the open parts. Then I understood why the Saudis and the Arabs wear full clothes. So climate has something to do with your clothing, and then it becomes a part of your culture. Like the food is part of your culture. You long for the food you grew up with. You long to wear the clothes you wore. If I am not prejudiced towards your food, your clothing, I can connect with you. If I connect with you, I am at peace, you are at peace. My peace, Omar, comes if people are at peace. If there is a disturbance around, fightings around, I'm apprehensive, I'm in tension. So it behooves for us to build that kind of peace, pluralism around. In politics, the problem is when Republicans start bashing the Democrats, what happens? I talked to the chairman of the Republican Party. If you bash the Democrats, why would they come to your meetings? If you want Democrats to agree with certain in the Congress or in the Capitol Hill, you need to appeal to them. If you bash them, which they do all the times, don't expect them to support you. And Democrats also bash Republicans. Sit down, put down your differences. There may be a list of 10, but when you narrow down, there may be only 3 differences between them, not 100 differences. If they do that, public will support them. There will be better governance, better policy. Instead of beating the other person, you are seeking their support. So that's in politics. Now come to the workplace. And this is a very critical one I'm working on. Parents sometimes have an attitude towards people who are different. I can share what happens in the US. I cannot share much about, I can share about India, maybe in Bangladesh. They have an attitude, for example, towards blacks, towards Jews, towards whites, or towards brown people. Each one has an attitude. The children, their children imbibe that attitude. This may not tell, hate this guy, black guy, or hate this Jewish guy, but children accept that. It sits in their heart, brewing. Now, I don't know in Bangladesh, in the US, not a single city or a workplace where you don't find people of different faiths, races, ethnicities. You go to any office, there is Bangladeshi, there is an Indian, there is a white American, there is Jewish, there is a all people work together. If you're conditioned in childhood to hate this person, you don't connect with them at workplace. If you don't connect with them, what happens is good ideas for the company are not come forward. I don't want to share with this Jewish guy or a Muslim guy or a black guy. When you have that attitude, the loser is the company. We're trying to see if anybody has those attitudes in Facebook or any place else. Don't hire them. Coming home, the same man goes home, man or woman. At home, his mind or her mind is obsessed with that guy, that girl who was Jewish, Muslim, black, whatever.
Right.
What happens? I have my children. If it is a man, you have a spouse, wife, and children. You are not talking to them. They are saying something, you just shake your head, but you're not connecting with them. You're not in tune with them. So it is best thing to get rid of prejudice at workplace, at politics. So this is the gamut of the work we do at Pluralism.
Absolutely. Well, yes, absolutely. And thank you, Mike, for sharing that, because I'll just add a few things with regards to Bangladesh. At least I think that it's a largely homogenized nation where 86% of the population is Muslim and 98% are ethnic Bengalis, and so we really don't get a whole lot of diversity with regards to ethnicity and culture, because it was a country that was literally born out of the Bengali nationalism sentiment. And the experiment with Pakistan unfortunately didn't work out very well for us. But yes, I sometimes wonder how the country would have fared if we had a lot more diversity. For example, United Bengal was a reality where West Bengal was a part of Bangladesh, along with the northeastern, the Seven Sisters, and maybe Rakhine State in Burma. Perhaps we could have tested that theory out to see how Bangladesh would have fared. But I will definitely share one thing with you, Mike, as well as with anybody else outside of Bangladesh who might be watching or listening, that whatever we've managed to achieve in the last 52 years as a Muslim majority secular nation, I think that anybody from the outside who came in and took a look and saw how we've shaped our education system, where each and every ethnic and religious group is taught their own script as well as their own religious history. That is something I feel, as a Bangladeshi, I feel very proud about. And I'm sure that this is probably very similar in India as well, where each religious and ethnic community gets to learn about their own background as well as have a general education as well. And I'm sure that maybe in the US as well, a similar system is being followed, though I'm not entirely familiar with it. But coming to that, Mike, with regards, just staying with pluralism, there is one more point that I would like to help define, and that is obviously in the title of the book. You talk about building a cohesive America. Can you help us understand what is meant by the word cohesiveness and cohesive America? In fact, how would you define this term?
Sure, I'll be happy to.
Building it. Yeah.
Cohesive is working together without hassles. Let me give two examples. Look at the universe. All the planets are working cohesively. If they collide, the entire universe will collapse. Come to the human body, the brain, heart, lungs, kidneys, and different organs of the body have to work together, work cohesively for me to function normally. If one of the organs does not function well, then I will have headaches, or I will not function normally. So cohesion is working together without fighting with each other, working together for a common goal. The common goal God has created is to function normally. And that's why all the organs work together. And no organ, there is a humor, if I can share. So one day the organs, body organ, brain says, I am the most important organ in the body. Without me, you just cannot function. You cannot move. You cannot do anything. Right. Heart says, no. I am the most important. If I don't pump the blood regularly, you will collapse within seconds. So the rectum, which is the excretory part of the body, he says, you guys, you are dumb. I am the most important part of the body. So I started laughing. You rectum, you excrete waste material and you think you're important? He said, I am important. He says, no, you are not important. You are useless. You are meaningless to us. The rectum says, I will show it to you how important I am. He blocks one day, second day, everybody developed stomach bloats and everything. And then they decided, hey, rectum, you are the most important part of the body. So what the idea is, nobody in a society, whether in the streets, cleaning the toilets, or a CEO, everyone has got a role to play to create that society to function cohesively. So all of this working cohesively in the United States means we all work together for a common goal that is working cohesively.
Absolutely, absolutely. And thank you so much for that, Mike. And so hopefully the heart, the brain, and the rectum will all function together to have a cohesive body. And of course, we'll hope for the same for America to have a cohesive society and for Muslim Americans to be a huge part of that. So, Mike, if I could just ask you one thing. With regards to Islam, at least, we see that traditionally there's always this notion of Islam being a salvation theology, and as such, there's this notion that there's no salvation outside the mosque. And I think that even with Christianity, to some extent, there are some who believe that there's no salvation outside the church. So would you say that this religious exclusivism, is it an issue only with the Islamic religion and with Muslims, or would you say that no, this is a negative way of thinking that is prevalent in pretty much all religious communities, or it's not just exclusive to Islam, but you could find it in other communities as well. How would you look at it, and what would be your opinion on that?
Absolutely. In Christianity, you come to God, Jesus says, only through me, only through Jesus. And that is what they believe. It's okay to believe that. But to disbelieve what others' beliefs are not right is wrong. Lakum dinakum comes to my mind. Your faith is dear to you as my faith is dear to me. We cannot compare these faiths. Yes, this exclusivity is prevalence, but I can talk clearly about Islam. Islam is not an exclusive religion.
Right.
Allah is Allah of the entire universe, Rabbul Alameen. Muhammad, peace be upon him, mercy to the entire mankind. He's not God. That's what God is saying. Why would the hadith say that Allah is not for others? Muhammad is not for others. They are for all. They don't have divisions. They agree. So let me cite you the verse 262 in the Quran.
Right.
And the same verse is repeated about 14 times. This cannot be more crystal clear than about pluralism. It says, whether you are Christian, Jewish, Sabian, or the other, your rewards are with me. My grace is with you if you do these three things in that verse.
Right.
Belief in God, belief in accountability of your actions, which we call a day of judgment. Then third is caring for fellow human beings. If you do these three, your reward is with me. It is one of the most pluralistic religions. It is inclusive. And then there are several other verses that cite that I have sent Quran to you as I have sent other books to other people living in different places.
Right.
All of them are legitimate. It doesn't say they're illegitimate or Quran negates other books. Islam is not exclusive, but Muslims, not all Muslims, Bangladeshi Muslims, they have not, but many Muslims in other countries made Islam exclusive. Only if you are a Muslim, you earn God's grace. That is wrong. That is not what Allah says in the Quran in 14 different verses. If you read the tafsir or the exegesis by Muhammad Asad, he is the most respected Quran translators. It is all there in the tafsir, right in the Quran. Whatever I'm saying in my mouth, it is in the Quran.
Absolutely.
So Islam should not be an exclusive religion. We include everyone in Allah's creation, all of us.
Right.
And He is the Rabbul Alameen, Rahmatul Alameen. What that makes us, Omar, is Makhlukul Alameen. That means like Allah's mercy being. If they care for a belief in God, if they believe in accountability of their action, as a Muslim, I respect them, I embrace them, even though they may eat different food, wear different clothes, believe differently, worship differently. They're part of Allah's Alameen. I believe in God as a Rabbul Alameen, Muhammad as Rahmatul Alameen. So I become, if I follow them, I become Makhlukul Alameen.
Mhm.
Islam is not an exclusive religion. If some say need to correct it.
For sure, absolutely. And I couldn't agree more, Mike, because that's been my reading of the Quran as well, and I can definitely concur with what you've said with regards to the pluralistic worldview of the Prophet Muhammad as well as the Quran and God in His infinite wisdom, who says in the Quran that I've created many nations and tribes so that they may all get to know each other and not hate one another. And the best of those amongst God's creatures are the ones who are the best in piety and good works. So I think that says it really well. So Mike, coming back to the book and staying with Surah Fatiha, the opening chapter of the Quran, where you've definitely said many times that God sent the Prophet Muhammad as a mercy to humankind, and God is not just the God of the Muslims, but the God of the universe. Rabbul Alameen, and you've definitely used Surah Fatiha many times to support your worldview with regards to pluralism. I would like to just stay with Surah Fatiha a little bit more and talk about chapter 3 of the book, which is entitled An Apology to Jews and Christians. And I also want to bring in the question of bad translations, which you've also alluded to in the book, where sometimes we get, Muhammad Asad, of course, is a fantastic translator of the Quran, but we do see sometimes in a lot of Muslim societies that the Quran, when it gets translated into English from the original Arabic, we not only do we get just the text, but we also get the translator's interpretation, which interpolates into the verses itself, and sometimes it's there in parentheses, and sometimes the parentheses aren't even there. So would you just walk us through the bad translation example that you mentioned in the book, specifically with regards to Surah Fatiha and how it was trying to be disparaging towards Jews and Christians? Please walk us through that.
Almost 18 years ago, I was called to go speak in a church. I was getting ready to go. In the line, I was saying Islam is the religion of peace. So my Jewish friends standing behind me said, Mike, you're wrong. Then he goes to his car, brings the copy of the Quran, translated by Muhammad Taqi. It is the most popular translation for a long time. It is not anymore. Muhammad Asad has taken over.
Mhm.
So he opens the Quran, shows me غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين, which simply means help me walk the right path, not the path of those who went astray. That's what it is. But that guy had translated not the path of those who went astray, like Jews, in parentheses, and those who earned his anger, in parentheses, Christians. If a Christian and Jewish person reads that, that's what is God telling them that we are the wrong people, we are the bad people.
Absolutely.
And this was a mistake. I'll give you a little story behind it. At the Parliament of World Religion, which is a major organization in 5 years, once in 4 years, in Australia in 2009, I was there to present Quran reading, the scriptural reading. The house was packed. Front rows were all Saudis and Arabs, and the other row was all Iranian clergy. Anyway, the key point there is I put a PowerPoint presentation and showed the Surah Fatiha, each word, its meaning. Everybody, Hindus, Muslims, everybody was in tune with it. They felt connected with it. They loved it. When it come to the 7th verse, I put the verse that the other translation. And they said, have you read this translation? They said, yes. Is that the right thing? And I said, we don't know. We read the Quran. That's what it says. So I went back and put the only Arabic verse on the screen. Then I asked, I want somebody in this audience who is not a Muslim, but can read. Guess who stood up? Bishop Ria. He is the Bishop of Jerusalem. He said, my language is Arabic. My Bible is in Arabic. I said, go ahead. He said, help me walk the right path, not the path of those who went astray. And I asked him, is there a word Christian or Jew in that? He says, no. Then I looked at the people. This is the mistake they made.
Mm.
So finally, I was a small part again, like you said, drop in the ocean. I was a small part in meeting with the Saudi clerics in the US. And correct translations since 2012 are corrected. It is not those words. But before that, ICNA, which is a Muslim organization in the US,
Mhm.
they had a toll-free number. You call us toll-free, we'll send the Quran. And that was the copy of the Quran being sent. There are about 3 to 4 million copies of those Qurans in the hands of Christians and Jews and Hindus in the US or in other countries. Thank God they're all being corrected now.
Absolutely.
And what is the tragedy is Muslims believe, no, you are wrong. This is the meaning. You're wrong. No, 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 no. Read the translation is not the word of Allah. Allah can be that narrow. He's the Rabbul Alameen. He
Mm.
can't discriminate against his own creation.
For sure.
Sorry.
Absolutely.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, yeah, no worries. Yeah, I think bad translations, Mike, is something that we all struggle with. And luckily for me, I did all of my studying in English. And so, the English translation of the Quran that I made use of was the one from 1934, Abdullah Yusuf Ali. I also like Muhammad Asad's translation, of course, Pickthall. They're all wonderful translations. And especially if I may talk a little bit about Abdullah Yusuf Ali's translation. You have the text on top and you have the commentary at the bottom, and the text and the commentary are always kept separate so that anybody who's reading it, the layperson, will know what exactly the Quranic text is and what exactly the translator's interpretation of those verses are. But I think a lot of our viewers and listeners may
Yes.
also be quite shocked to know that in Bengali language translations, unfortunately, we're still stuck with bad translations, because you not only have the text of the Quran translated into Bengali, but you also have the interpreters, the translator's interpretation, which is kept next to the text itself. And so the lay Bengali Muslim who might want to read the Quran, they kind of come away with a lot of confusion because they're not able to separate God's word from humanity's word or the translator's word. So yes, a little bit of work to be done, but let's stick to your book and another chapter which I would like to touch on. So, Mike, during
Well,
your
may I add
introduction,
one more point to that?
yeah, sure, please go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. When I hear that the Quran is translated in a Kannada language, Tamil, I shudder because the mistranslation will go there and it will create more. The source of Islamophobia is those mistranslations. We are responsible for creating Islamophobia more than anybody else.
That's right. Yes. And I think that's really well said. And it's an unfortunate truth that we definitely all have to try and rectify. So, Mike, there's one more point that I wanted to touch upon with regards to yourself personally. In the introduction, I think that I was hoping that you would mention that you're not only an author and a speaker and a radio host, but you're also a wedding officiant, correct? And of course, because we're connected on
Yes.
Facebook and in LinkedIn, of course, I see the joy that you get in officiating interfaith marriages. And with that in mind, I wanted to ask you something with regards to chapter 11 of the book, which is entitled, Can a Muslim Woman Marry a Non-Muslim? And of course, if I were to just give some context for our viewers and listeners who may not be as familiar with the text of the Quran, let me just try and explain it in a very rudimentary way, and then I'll let you, carry on from there. So, as per my understanding, what happened is that right after the Battle of Uhud in the year 625 CE, when the Muslims had lost their battle against the Meccans, there were in all probability there was a lot of war widows, and so there was a permission that came to have for a Muslim man to take more than one spouse, so that they'll be able to provide the war widows with homes, because there weren't enough men to go around. And at the same time, because the Muslims at the time were a minority, in order to discourage, uh, the Muslim women who were already a part of a nascent community to go over to the Meccan side. So most probably it must have been a temporary restriction not to have Muslim women marry non-Muslim men at the time for that particular milieu and for that particular situation. But given that a lot of Muslims seem to see the Quran as a book for all times, and granted they can be allowed to do that, except for the fact that they should also read it in context. Would you be able to help us understand more as to why you feel that yes, non-Muslim Muslim women can marry Muslim men? Sorry, let me rephrase that. Muslim women can marry non-Muslim men, and that the restriction that was there in the Quran and still there is only for that particular time and place. So do please give us your thoughts on that.
It is part of the Muslim culture, not in the Quran. Quran will not prohibit a woman marrying anybody because we're all Rabbul Alameen. We're all part of his creation. I restrict that. If he's a Rabb of the Alameen, he would not restrict that. There are few verses that have been, again, question of interpretation. Let me put it this way. The reason I wrote that point, it is, I think in the preface I said, it is to protect, particularly help the American single Muslim women. That was the context of writing the book. I have known there are 20 single women in Dallas, Texas, that I known them for about 30 some years. They have remained single. Some of them were dating or going out with the Christians, Jews, and Hindus. But then when it came to a defining moment of marriage, they were afraid what the society will say. And as a result, they have remained single. There are not single Muslim men in the United States.
Okay.
One. Number two, they are reluctant to marry Muslim men from outside the United States because they have lived here for 40 years, 35 years, and they are culturally American now, the way of their life. If somebody comes from the India, for example, Pakistan, and they have come from somewhat misogynistic culture, and has to tell the wife what to do, and that doesn't work in the US. As a result, Muslim women don't go marry outside the United States. They are single, and I use the word rotting. I felt sorry. They have remained single because of this attitude of fellow Muslims towards them. First of all, they are not going to have children, single women in 50s and up.
Right.
And they need somebody for them to be with, to be talk with, to live with. So it is for them I wrote this book.
Okay.
And I found Quran does not restrict. There is not one verse in the Quran that restricts. There is one verse, 221, which talks about marry a maid servant. They use the word slave at that time. A maid servant, man or woman, depending on your gender, but not somebody who is not part of the group. The simple reason is God wants men and women to marry and live in harmony. God loves those people who get married. Also, one of his associates, prophet said, there is nothing like people living in married and living in harmony. Given that, to live in harmony, one has to be compatible. For example, a maid servant knows what you eat, what you wear, or when you pray. He or she knows your all routine. Culturally, they're more familiar with you and more compatible than somebody who don't know anything about you. So that's what that ayat means, to be compatible. Muslims in the old society, they define compatibility in terms of religion. If you're a Muslim, if you're not a Muslim, you're not compatible. That is not true. Among Hindus, they look at the stars or Janam Patri to be compatible. Every society has got something or the other to keep clock to themselves. But that is not true. In the US, a boy and a girl go to college. After 2 or 3 years, they find more commonalities in them, more compatibility, the same place. They find to be more compatible. And they come together and want to marry. They live in harmony. That is what God wants. As far as the religion, Islam is for internal improvement, not to become Muslims, but for internal improvement, to be a good human being. Like you said in the verse 49:13, he created us to be different. So he wants to see how we get along. And the logic is to be piety. And whether you're Hindu, Muslim, or a Christian, individuals are pious. As a group, people may not behave the same. Individuals are pious. And it may not be applicable in other societies. And I was very clear it is for my society in the United States.
Right, absolutely, and I think that makes a lot of sense because, and I think that I do hope that anybody who picks up the book, takes to heart everything that you've written, because I myself will say that it is a fantastic book, and it really does go delve right into the heart of the matter, which is the American Muslim agenda. And it is, like you said, it's exactly what it says on the tin, that it is a blueprint for American Muslims to integrate themselves into the melting pot that is America. So yes, wonderful. So Mike, I just want to, yeah, please go ahead.
Can I think?
Sure, please go ahead.
There is a chapter 16 in that. There is a one chapter, brand new chapter, never written in Islamic literature. It's called Islamic Values.
Islamic values, yeah.
There are two cited in it, but there are 20 values now, and we are going to put a book together and also make it as a syllabus for teaching Islam. And Islam is just not about namaz, the zakat. Islam is more about creating societies, the alameen, where everybody lives in harmony. That is what God wants.
Absolutely.
And that's what that chapter, and it is not my, it is my writing, but cited from the Quran. Each of the 12 values are backed up by the Quran and Hadiths.
Okay, that's wonderful. Yeah, and of course, all of us who are fans of this particular edition will definitely wait with a bated breath for the next edition to come out with the additional values that you've talked about. So yes, that's wonderful to hear. So Mike, I just want to backtrack a little bit to what we spoke about in the beginning of this interview with regards to Mr. Sean Hannity, of course, who is such a very popular conservative commentator. Can you give us an update on what your current relationship is like with Mike Hannity? Are you guys still in touch? Does he still bring you on his show,
No,
for example?
well,
you tell us a bit more about that.
No, I have not been on his show for the last 4 years. One reason is I went on dialysis. He calls on a short notice to go on the show. And I went to the show, but all of a sudden I was not able to get on the show and talk. It happened twice. So I'm waiting for somebody to donate the kidney. When I get the donation, I will, inshallah. And he and I always butted each other. But he's a good man inside his heart. But what he does is for the ratings. But he has done a lot of damage in creating anti-Muslim feelings. But people are coming around.
Absolutely. And of course, Mike, yes, for sure. And of course, Mike, we wish you a speedy recovery from your dialysis. And anybody who's watching or listening to this podcast who may want to be a donor, kidney donor, I do hope that, inshallah, that you're able to overcome this huge challenge to life.
Yes, if somebody wants to donate the kidney, I can give them the number, they call me, and we can come here to the US. We will pay my insurance will pay all the expenses. They can come and go through some tests, and if it works out, thank God.
Absolutely, inshallah. And of course, I think that now might be a good time, Mike, to actually put in your mail address and your phone number if you'd like to share it with our viewers and listeners, so that if in case there is a good Samaritan who is watching or listening, they'll be able to. What would be the best way to get in touch with you? If you could just help us out with that.
My phone number is 214-325-1916. You have to put 1. I'm also on WhatsApp, and also the email is very simple: mikeghouse@gmail.com.
Okay, fantastic.
GHOUSE. So
fabulous.
That's and of course they can go to the website, thegausediary.com, where everything about me is in that diary, and worldmuslimcongress.org or interfaithmarriages.org, a whole lot of them. By the way, I have done many Bangladeshi men and women interfaith marriages here in the US. Many.
Okay, wonderful. Well, that's amazing. So I'm really glad to hear that the Bangladeshi community in America is doing well, and of course, I do hope that they're well-meaning and contributing members of society, no matter where they're, whether it's New York, LA, or Dallas, or Washington D.C. And I do hope that they're keeping well. So thank you so much for that, Mike. And of course, any good Samaritan who's out there, we'd love for them to help out with what you're going through. So Mike, there's just a couple of other things that I just wanted to very quickly touch upon. Of course, we've talked about Sean Hannity, and of course, another person that you've name dropped in the book a couple of times is the late Mr. Tariq Fata. And of course, for me, he is somewhat of a familiar figure because he was a Canadian, and I was in Canada for a while. And I confess that I'm not entirely familiar with all his work, but you've also butted heads against him a couple of times. So for our viewers and listeners who may not be as familiar with the late Mr. Tariq Fata, and he's no longer with us, of course, but could you just very briefly tell us where your two ideologies were at odds with each other? If you could just walk us through that very quickly.
Tariq Fata was an opportunity, and he found a niche. If he start bashing Muslims, he will gain support from some Jewish quarter, not all Jewish, some Jewish and some Christian quarters. He earned that with them, and he bashed Muslims. I'll give you this short story. I was sitting in the front at the Capitol Hill Muslim Day. That was the day. I was sitting in the front. I wanted to see what's going on. So Tariq Fatah was one of the speakers, telling you his ideology. He was there, and I was sitting at very front, because I always do. Normally, when somebody speaks, nobody interrupts them. I don't do that. He started speaking and points his finger at me. My name is Gun. I go by my Mike. And he points, Muhammad, the Muslims 5 times a day pray and curse Jews and Christians. Isn't that right? And I said, no, it is not right. And he said, this is what the Quran says. And I said, Tariq, you are wrong. That is the mistranslation. You know the right translation, but you're saying this for some gains. You're wrong. And then I turned to this guy, I forgot his name. I said, you know the truth. Tell the translation of that verse. He corrected Tariq Fatah, and he was very ashamed. Then he says, and he was so stupid and dumb. He tells there were Jews of the 25 some people, there were about 12 of them were Jewish people. While the Quran is written from right to left, as if that was an evil thing. I was hoping the Jewish people stand up, you dumbass. Sorry, my language. You dumb guy. Jew is also written from right to left. So he gains support and funding and putting on pedestal by bashing Muslims. I took it back to him. I had urged many Muslims in India, don't condemn him, but go head on with him. One-on-one, fact to fact, he will lose. And he did lose with me.
Correct. Well, thank you for sharing that, Mike. Because I hadn't read his book, but I was somewhat familiar with him 20 years back, and this was right after 9/11, and so I was wondering, well, who is this angry Canadian man who's always, bashing his own community? So I was way too busy with my studies to, to delve deeply into what he was up to. But I do remember a couple of years back, when I saw the two of you, go at it. You ended one of your articles by saying that he shouldn't mess with me. I'm a Texan, something like that. I think you might have said, right? I thought that was quite interesting, and I was thinking, oh gosh, our Canadian representative must have made a meal of whatever this Texan man had done to him. So yeah, but just making it a very funny story, cutting it short. Let's end this episode on a happier note, Mike. And so I would like to touch upon another prominent figure that you've mentioned in the book. And his name is, of course, Mr. Keith Ellison, the 30th Attorney General of Minnesota, the incumbent Attorney General. Do please tell us what his claim to fame is and how he has been an inspiration for Muslims in America and how he managed to make it into your book. So do please tell us a little bit more about Mr. Keith Ellison.
He's a mainstream American, and he is kind of a guiding light for many Muslims, cultural Muslims. Let me put it this way. He was the first Muslim who boldly acknowledged the presence of LGBT community. Yeah. And after that I was the second Muslim who said we should not be judgmental about gays and lesbians. It is God who judges, not you and me. Our role is to know each other, learn about each other. So now also came with this statement. So Keith Ellison is a guiding light in that. And if you got some time, I want to share another little story with him.
Yes, please do. Yeah, go ahead.
There was a time in October 2015, if I'm not mistaken, there were about 25 some right-wing rifle-carrying Americans, and they threatened mosques. They were listed 15 mosques in the US. They will go with the rifles and in front of the mosque like a threat. So I went there. When they come, close the mosque and go home. That was the decision. So I got up. Keep this is the God-given opportunity for Muslims, not to close the mosque, but show who we are.
Right.
When these riflemen come to the mosque, set up tables in front of the mosque and put some hot dogs. And also, even I will arrange for it, even have somebody playing national anthems, American patriotic songs. When they come, they will say, gee, I came here to fight with these guys. They're treating us with respect. We should not close the mosques. They debated for a few seconds. Fine, we will not close the mosques. Then what I did was I wrote a press release, went all over the country. Please join us, and you are welcome inside the mosque to see how we pray. And all of a sudden, they canceled all the things they had. They realized, hey, these Muslims are not going to fight with us. They're not going to resist with us. They're welcoming us. Still, 3 or 4 of them went there.
Mm.
In the mosque in Arizona, invited them,
Right.
and gave them food, showed them how we do. They apologized. And one of them chose to become a Muslim.
Mm. Wow. Wow.
So this is the Keith Ellison's decision that affected this thing. But I was able to speak up. He allowed me to speak.
Absolutely. Wow, that is quite the amazing story, Mike. And thank you so much for sharing that. And kudos to you and to Mr. Ellison for taking the positive step, the brave step, to welcome the people who came with guns and tanks and whatever. So yes, it was probably a very brave thing to do, and it was probably also the right thing to do because, of course, as you said, that somebody not only had their impression of Islam and Muslims changed, but also decided to join the community. So that really is an amazing story, and I think that this story in the book really made my day because it just shows how the power of engagement can really help to win hearts and minds. And of course, it is part of the bigger plan of having Muslims and non-Muslims in America living together in a cohesive society. So with that, Mike, I have to say that I've pretty much exhausted most of my questions for the show, but I do have a very surprise guest question for you, Dr. Tariq Chima, who happened to be one of the people that actually put in a testimonial in the book. And he is, of course, the founder of the World Congress of Muslim Philanthropists. So the question from Dr. Tariq Chima is that, dear Mike, where you see American Muslims to be in the next 20 or 30 years from now, and what are the 3 things that the Muslims from Gen Z should be focusing on to grow strong in America? So yeah, there you go. The question from Dr. Tariq Chima. Yeah, please go ahead.
Dr. Chima, the good news is I am finished 4 chapters in the book. It's called The Madam President. And the book is about a Muslim woman running for president in the year 2036. That is 13 more years to go. And what do we have to do to get to that point? I am training people to run for public office, encouraging them, and also training them to be pluralist. They can earn the votes of Jews, Hindus, Muslims, Christians, the LGBT community, and all of them to be very inclusive American. And I think the Muslims will become an integral part of American society and do exceedingly well in the coming 20 years. And I'm hoping after the Muslim woman, my imaginary scenario is Muslim woman president, the Homeland Security guy is a Hindu, and we are looking at different people to work cohesively to make America one of the greatest nations on the earth to live for.
Absolutely.
I hope that answers your questions.
Oh yes, absolutely. Yes, and why not? That aspiration should always be there. And just to quote, one of my favorites from the American political sphere, Mrs. Clinton, who I think very famously said that she may not have gotten the presidency, and not become the first woman president, but at least whatever she's done has helped to manage to punch 18 million holes in that glass ceiling, and so she's obviously paved the way for whoever comes after her. So, Mike, I have to say that we're pretty much coming to the end of this episode, and we've gone a little bit over time. But with your permission, we have a couple of staple questions in the show that we really love to ask you. One of the staple questions that we have is, if you could select a book that you believe that every young person should read at least once in their lifetime. It may or may not be related to Islam or Muslims or political theory or social theory. What would be that one particular book that you feel that everybody in the world should read at least once in their lifetime?
I think Dale Carnegie's book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, the title suggests, but that book helps you understand and respect other people. When you respect other people, you tend to build relationship. And when you have relationship, you can have a city, community, state, nation. And that would be the one book I would recommend. Of course, I would ask them to read Quran, Muhammad Asad's translation, and also Dr. Lale Bakhtiar translations about women. Muhammad Asad is still primitive on those translations, but Dr. Lale Bakhtiar has written the most authentic translations. Those two books will give you a good guidance. Quran is a book of guidance to live cohesively, to live peacefully, to consider all humanity as God's creation.
Absolutely, yeah, for sure, and of course, anybody who's familiar with the self-development genre will of course know Dale Carnegie. In fact, I do like that book. I also love his other book, which is How to Stop Worrying and Start Living, which was published in 1948, and of course, the
Yes,
book was published in 1936. So, as I like to say to a lot of my viewers and listeners, I moonlight as a podcaster and a YouTuber, but in my day job, I'm a full-time sales director. And so that's why that other book of Dale Carnegie, How to Stop Worrying and Start Living, really helps with stress management. So if anybody were to ask me the question, what book I would recommend, so that would be one of those.
I forgot to tell about this book.
Yes,
I
absolutely.
forgot to tell about this book.
Oh, for sure, for sure. With that goes without saying that the American Muslim Agenda is, of course, the book that everybody must read because it is such a well-written book and it talks from common sense. And as you said, that if it isn't simple, it's not Islam. If it's not common sense, it's not Islam. So, Mike, there's one more thing I wanted to ask with regards to some of your heroes. You've said many times that you are a Gandhian, and of course, Mr. Gandhi is of course this is young Mr. Gandhi, but of course we all
Yes.
know him as a Prince of Peace, and of course, tell us a little bit about what you admire about somebody like Mr. Gandhi. You've also mentioned Abraham Lincoln as well, but if I were to give you a choice between Mr. Gandhi, Mr. Lincoln, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Mother Teresa, who is the one person amongst all of them that you'd say that you hold in the most highest of esteem? So do please go ahead. Yeah.
Why do you make my life that difficult?
Just doing my job.
No, I mean, Lincoln changed the society about African, the black and the white. There was a major cultural change in the entire history of the mankind. Mahatma Gandhi brought nonviolence to do it. He gave us the way how to be assertive and gain political freedom. I see him every day in my life, twice in my dream. In 1973, he came in my dream with the chancellor of Bangalore University. I don't know why. Three of us were standing on my back and said, "Beta, tujhe bahut kaam karne hai," means, son, you have to do a lot of work. That is my inspiration. He came back again in 1993 and said the same thing. And he has inspired me to do the work I do. But with Mother Teresa's statement every day, she says, if you want to make peace with your enemies, go talk to them.
Right.
Talking among ourselves doesn't change the equation. That has helped me deal with Sean Hannity, the copies of the Quran, and all those extremists. I go talk to them. If I don't talk to them, who will? So Mother Teresa has influenced me greatly. Mahatma Gandhi. Every time you say something nice about the society, I thought I'm quoting from the Quran. It comes from Martin Luther King. So these four people that she has said, and of course, Prophet Muhammad. Right. All these people are in my life on every day. If, for example, if I am frustrated that people are not listening to me, what pluralism is about. If people don't listen to me, that's fine. If Prophet Muhammad was not listening, if this is, that is my message to me, do I accept that? So these are the things that influence me on a daily basis.
Absolutely. Well, fantastic, fantastic, and thank you, Mike, for sharing that. Because I think in hindsight it was a bit unfair of me to put you on the spot with regards to all four. But I'm glad that you've managed to articulate it really well for our viewers and listeners. Who after this, I really hope that they also feel inspired to go out and read a couple of books about Dr. King, Mahatma Gandhi, Mother Teresa, and everybody else that you've mentioned, including Prophet Muhammad, and of course Jesus, whom you've also name dropped in the book as one of your inspirations. So, for our viewers and listeners who have been with us all this time, firstly, thank you for staying with us till the end. And if you haven't subscribed yet to the show, do please do so if you're watching this on YouTube. And then, as I said, do please continue to support the show through Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. The book, once again, is American Muslim Agenda by Dr. Mike Ghouse. It's a fantastic book written by a fantastic author, so please go out and buy the book, especially if you're a Muslim living in America. And if you're not a Muslim living in America, you're a non-Muslim who's curious about the Muslim community living in America, this book is for you as well. So in fact, this is a book, it's a book for all people within American society as well as the society outside of America. So, Mike, thank you once again for your time as well. We've gone way over time, but I want to be respectful of your time as well. And we'll let you go now. I've had a pleasure talking to you. You are not only are you one of the best thinkers of our generation, but the blueprint that you've put out here, not only has it helped enlighten me about American society and about the American Muslim condition, but I'm sure that anybody else who picks up the book, no matter what society or what country they're living in, is going to benefit equally. So my thanks to you on behalf of all of us here at the show.
Assalamu alaikum.
Welcome, Salam.